So we have another CSM19 interview. If you don't know me and you happen to be watching the stream, I'm Kishal Adrian, CEO of Eve Rookies, and we have Gideon Zendikar today. His talk came to come. It's late. Has come to talk about his campaign tonight. So we have put together some questions, and we will start with introduce yourself and tell us why you start playing.
I started because I was invited by a university friend. I started out in Providence, roamed with him a little bit. I very quickly started FCing for the Provi block. Later on moved with Evictus, that used to be a member of Provi block, into the Legacy Coalition, FC'd Legacy Coalition up to the highest level. After that, I moved into TRC because of some mismatch of the direction Evictus was going. You maybe know TRC as the Rogue Consortium. We fought in Providence against the Providence entities there. And then after that, I moved into Ferra and started small gang PvPing from Ferra with the Desync Corporation. How I started, I got invited to the game. I think like a lot of people, it's not usually a game that you come across if you are not actively invited. And I enjoyed the environment and the strategic part of the conflicts within EVE. And this is probably one of the biggest concerns I have in EVE. It's that there's a lack of strategic components, and there used to be more strategic bottlenecks. There used to be more strategic choke points. That even if you're not the biggest group, you could go for these choke points and inflict heavy damage to a bigger entity.
So, is it safe to say that this is going to be one of your campaign points?
It is, yeah. It's the first one. Make geography matter again. Is probably, I think, the most important part. Lately, but within the last 5 years, 6 years, CCP has introduced a lot of tools that break geography. I'm just gonna link some. The conduit drive on Redeemers, the ansiplexes are the worst offender, and not having any timer when you take an ansiplex. And I think another part that people don't realize and how much of an impact it has is not just the ansiplexes, but the auto-routing through ansiplexes. And I get why CCP introduced it, because big groups already had like their personal automatic route finder through their own networks. But the automatic route finder just right-clicks that destination and you have a whole fleet chasing you, even without the knowledge of their own jump bridge network, is something that seriously shifted the day-to-day content and day-to-day strategic operations within NullSec, even on the smallest of scales.
Okay, so then what are two other points that you're bringing to the table?
I want to have a heavy look on income imbalances between different parts of space. We have the Abyssal PvE that we have Wormhole Space, we have Podschwin, we have high-sec incursions, and if you look at Abyssal PvE and Wormholes, those are usually not the most connected parts of space. You can take precautions to isolate yourself from other players, and then you still have the highest income sources within the game. And high-sec incursions, it's high-sec, so interaction is already limited with high-sec incursions in the first place, unless you talk about some suicide ganking fleet. But this is usually not what people really refer to if they want to talk about organic PvP, PvE content within EVE. So
Okay.
in general, I would say like look into a balance of income sources, and hopefully there would be some active income sources that you could introduce, for example, into nullsec, so you actually have people out in maybe more expensive ships, but in a riskier setting. Maybe they get tackled by the sites, but then you wouldn't just have Ishtar spinning in a haven. You actually would have more expensive ships to hunt again.
Okay. So, anything else?
I think the last point would be ship balance. You talked with Drake just earlier about Marauders. I think people are concentrating on some odd parts about Marauder balance. It's usually the application combined with the DPS that is super suppressing against anything cruiser-sized. And you probably would just have to look at ranges, not more than buffer tank. Because usually battleship doctrines, if they are long-range fits, suffer from application on smaller targets, and the combination of the high DPS that you already have in a Marauder, and then you just need some application help, and you can just chew through cruiser fleets, even if you don't have like 60, 70 people. You can start chewing through cruiser fleets at 20, 25 just easily.
Okay, Cool. So, do you know anything about Eve Rookies?
Yes, I've FC'd for Spectre Fleet, so we had connections over with even better with friends, and then there is some adjacent stuff that I listen to when doing Spectre Fleet and looking into what people are doing with new pros in the NPSI community as a whole.
Okay, very cool. So, as you know, we work with New Bros, and that is pretty important to us. So, in regards to new players, what do you think is their biggest challenge in Eve coming in today?
There's a lot of people that are inviting in starter systems that probably not the best people to take in new pros, because they either force them into a block that doesn't have the closest interaction with newer players right away, and they're just becoming part of a huge blob. It's usually better if you, like myself, I got invited by a friend, I joined that friend, and I immediately got invited into a smaller community, and I immediately started having connections within the game, not just real life friends, and you need to make that transition from people joining the game and immediately having tight connections with people inside the game, because there's a lot in this game you have to learn, and you don't even need many skill points. I prove that with Spectre fleets all the time. If you just have the right connections and the right actual real life skill set, like piloting skill set, you
Yep.
can have tremendous impact even with a low skill point character. So that is one part, and I don't know what CCP can do about that. Like just people spam inviting people in starting systems. Probably don't allow that to happen. Just don't let people invite into corporations in starting systems. That would be maybe something.
You'll be
Um,
pretty pleased to know that they have cracked down on that pretty hard this year.
okay. I was not aware of that. That's good to hear. But in general, like that spam inviting going into the big blobs is probably not the best idea.
Yep.
Still, like even in Jita, if people just go there to buy a ship and that's spam inviting,
Yep.
it's probably killing a lot of people that try to start the game.
Totally agree.
So,
So, next question
um,
is. Oh, go ahead.
adjacent to that, there's a point that I have in my campaign as well, is I want the default standing for Triglavian to be neutral and not hostile. Because especially in Spectre Fleet, I have these fleets, I have somebody who's joining the first time, I'm getting him set up, getting him a ship, maybe adjusting a fitting because he doesn't have the skill points, and I obviously realize he's a new player. I take him out, and I set a destination through Highsec, and we jump through one Triglavian system, and that new pro player is just dying. And
Didn't
he doesn't even know why.
Wasn't there a patch this year where CCP actually fixed that?
No, I still think that's the case, and I still see people dying to them on the
Okay,
regular.
I'll have. Well, I mean, brand new characters, not everybody.
Yeah.
I think brand new characters are actually zero.
Yeah,
Don't
they are
don't
zero,
quote me
but
on.
zero is hostile, right? Still.
I think
Do,
it's
do you
neutral.
do you still need to kill the one NPC? Can somebody in chat confirm?
Like I say, I'm not. I'll have to check back on that one, but I think that was actually
Yeah, I'm
fixed.
not 100% certain on that, but if that is fixed, then I'm happy because that was also a point in my last campaign. I haven't
I,
checked up on it yet.
yeah, I haven't had to do a standings fleet for quite a while.
Okay,
So
that's good to know.
I know, right? Next question is: What advice would you give to CCP to help improve new player retention?
In general, there was an idea of Phantomite also leveraged, and it's like getting some in the new player experience, have some experience where you maybe get matched up with a couple of people right away. And this can be catastrophic, of course, because not every interaction that you have with another person is good. But if that is a good interaction, you already have that like one other anchor, even if there's no anchor within the game, no other anchor, but you have that one person that could be an anchor for that person to stay engaged with the game. And that could be interesting. If you have mechanics like this within the new player experience where you are forced to interact with another person.
I agree with that. And the very last question in this segment is: when's the last time you actually ran through the new player experience?
I personally ran through it when it was introduced and overhauled. I have not done it since, just because it's usually not where I start picking people up. It's the point afterwards, if they come into Spectre Fleet, if they come into the new pro alliances that I used to lead, like Evictus and TRC, they're not known as the high skill uh, player ceiling alliances, but then I picked them up and tried to scout people that I thought had a lot of potential if you gave them the right guidance.
Okay. It's just a question that I ask because I found out during Summit this year that there's a lot of people, including CCP, who hasn't run through their own content for quite a while. So they just kind of expect things to be, a certain way, but it's not. The reality of new players coming through.
The,
So,
the thing is, why should a normal person go through it, right? Like, what is the new player experience providing? You actually have to seek it out and go through if you want to iterate and talk about it and see if it's actually working. But in
uh,
my opinion, I don't know if there's any PvE system that you could introduce that gets people talking. Like, this should be a primary focus, because even let's be honest. Like, the PvE experience is not the most organic PvE experience within all the games that exist on the market. Like, there are better games with better bots and better PvE experiences. So
true.
uh, the important part is getting people to talk and getting connected within the community.
No, totally agree with that. So, speaking of community, we'll go into the next question. What is your definition of community?
I think it depends on what scale you're thinking. Because like the tightest community right now is gonna be the corporation that I'm leading. And then adjacent to that, the groups we have very, very tight connections with that we roam with on a daily content. Then you could go one step further and you could say the alliances that we interact with, that the FCs that I know personally that we might interact with. Drake, for example, earlier talked about Bombas Bar. Like, I have interactions with the FCs from time to time just to take down a bigger target. So that is also something community. And then on an even bigger scale, if I'm FCing for Spectre Fleet, usually I know a couple of faces already in there and I can give them special roles and I can trust them to do those special roles. And then I can fill the fleet with people that might not be as experienced for the other roles, like regular DPS. And uh, then even one scale bigger, like I was at EVE Amsterdam this year, and then there would be like this real life component where you could say this is also a community, people coming together, drinking a couple of beers, and then maybe going into a pub or something similar.
Absolutely. So, people think that Eve is toxic. And when we talk about toxic, I'm not talking about PvP, I'm not talking about ganking, I'm not even talking about farming a little bit of salt. What we're talking about is the racism and the harassment, like true out of player harassment, and everything that we shouldn't be talking about and even thinking about in 2024. What is your stance on toxicity, and do you think it's actually an issue in Eve?
I think it's a general issue within all internet communications because people are louder than they would be if in real life. If they would see a real face, they would never say these things into your face because they would fear the repercussions. They just feel like there are no repercussions, so they're saying the most heinous things. I don't know how much you can do against that though, because you still have that. Anonymity is the problem in that case, and I don't want to get rid of that. If people don't want to show their face, if they don't want to be in the open, then they shouldn't have to. So that anonymity is just it is there. I don't want it to be gone, and it's also the reason why the toxicity exists. And all we can do as a community or a CCP is getting rid of the worst outliners of that behavior, trying to remove them as good as we can, and trying to find a good policy to deal with it. And it's not just CCP struggling with this or EVE struggling with this. It's every online community in some sense is struggling with this.
So, as the CEO of Eve Rookies, I have had a lot of people come to me, show me screenshots of clearly racist and inappropriate things that happen in the game. Yes, they should report it, but usually they don't know that this is a thing. If you encountered this type of thing in the game, what would you personally do?
It depends on the scale that is being thrown around, right? Like, I'm from Germany, like there are sometimes words thrown in my way that maybe come out of emotion, and I know it's more an emotional takedown, especially against the enemy FC. And then I usually don't take it too personal, and usually the people after like 10 minutes after they've calmed down, they're more chill again. I don't think that needs any repercussions. If it would be a continuous harassment over a long period of time and not just in an emotional moment, then I would think very different about this because this then goes into an area where you probably should then report this and go the appropriate ways. Um, Go ahead, you
So,
asked.
yeah, since you're also a FC, what do you do on your fleets if someone starts telling inappropriate jokes or making inappropriate comments about other fleet members?
I usually don't have that big of a problem with that just because I don't associate with people that usually do that. It's it's very, very rare that that happens in my personal circles. And within Spectre Fleet, there are clear guidelines that we try to follow. If that happens, then we just report that down the way, and then they're just removed from the community.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Okay, so now we're going to move into some. Let's pretend that you have actually made it to CSM19. So the very first one is you get onto CSM19, you get into your first meeting, and you get the plans for the next expansion from CCP. Not one thing that you're an expert in or you have campaigned for is in their plans. What do you do?
I think there are minor things that you can put on their agenda if they're just minor things and minor tweaks. Obviously, they're not going to change their main expansion things, but you can put their attention to like bugs and stuff that, or like small fixes that can happen. Like we had a fitting of T3 cruisers as an example. I think that was from CSM initiative, stuff like this. Bless you.
No, thank you.
If stuff like this comes up, then obviously you can push for that. One of those points, quality of life points, would be more shared bookmark folders. This is like a personal peeve of mine. Why is this not a thing? And then I would talk about that. Like you can put something like that is a minor point on the agenda, I think. And if the other points, like if I want to talk about the balance of all income within EVE and between different risk factors and trying to balancing them out, there's not a single part of space that I'm not willing to talk about and willing to go into and try to pressure them. So, and every activity somehow connects to some income source because that's usually where people accumulate. So I'm willing to talk about all that they're trying to address here. And just as an example, in the last patch, I think there was not a very good representation from NALSEC leadership towards their own line members, because I don't like I've listened to people talk about this in Spectre Fleet that are even from block people. I've talked to people within NALSEC because I'm currently on a deployment with a NALSEC group. The majority doesn't like the current changes, and they would just like to return to the old system because now the skyhooks are. I don't think anybody likes the current iteration of skyhooks that are just deployed with the patch yesterday. Yeah, yesterday.
Well, we will get to that, so hold that thought.
Okay.
So now, if you play EVE long enough, your gameplay is going to get changed and altered, without a doubt. What do you think you'll do as CSM if you find out an integral part of your community's play is going to be drastically changed or removed from the game? But here's the caveat: it's probably better for the game.
I've operated in different parts of space. Like like I said earlier, I was part of Providence, Spectre Fleet. Like I have so many avenues, I can switch that, and go for a different style. And I currently don't engage in anything that is considered completely broken by anybody in the game. So, like what do I do at the moment? I'm deployed with a little bit in nullsec and deployed there, so I use ansiblexes. I want them nerfed anyway, and I'm using them at the moment. I still think they're broken.
Okay.
So I want to see that happen. And Farah is not really something that is considered broken by anyone at the moment. At least I have not heard of anybody complaining about Farah being broken.
Okay, that's fair enough. What brought out this question is I think that this year's candidates are highly motivated to axe drone assist. And of course,
I'm one of them, yeah.
And of course, drone assist is something that is used within the incursion community. So, and of course, I'm old enough to remember when interceptors used to be nullified, and that totally destroyed my whole hunting style. So you had to change and switch up. So that's where this question kind of came from is, what happens when your community's play style gets axed?
It was axed before, right? Like the small gang mid-tier alliances. Look, where's a mid-tier alliance that currently holds off without bending the knee to a big group at the moment? There is none. So my playstyle already was axed, if you consider the old alliances that I've led.
That's very true. Fair enough. I
want the return of that, yeah, and that needs an axing.
True.
Within the strategic warfare, within antiplex and stuff like this, projection in general.
So before we get to the big what if question, if a community whose gameplay is totally outside of your expertise, I don't know, say the incursion community comes to you to ask you for help, are you willing to help them?
Yeah, of course. I hope that they would have a representative that has more knowledge than I have, and that person could reach out to me as well, and maybe we can. I'm willing to talk about the fundamentals of stuff and try to debate. Even if I don't know that, I will learn them fast, usually. On another point, I've interacted with most of the game at some point, just through the different communities I was part of. Like I was not just stuck in Nullsec. Like I was in Farah, I was in there was a ditch into wormholes. The people that are currently part of my community, and within my corporation that I have very tight bonds with, are also part of different communities as well, and they would address me as well, and I can ask them for feedback as well, and I can trust in their opinions quite a lot because I know that they are usually on the more skilled player base, and they could give me like a more fundamental breakdown of what the actual issues are.
Okay. And then the last one, the big one, and I think this is reflected in the latest two patches with skyhooks. Not my favorite conversation at the moment, but players expect CSM members to fix issues, and they also expect CSM to go and demand that changes be made. Have you thought about how you are going to balance the limitations placed on you as CSM, both by you are just an advisor and you have an NDA, against making sure players feel heard?
Obviously, CCP has a development cycle, and development has to go forward, and you cannot adjust it every time somebody is farting in your room. Basically, you have to have some way forward. But I don't know if the current iteration of Skyhooks, if there was not some like I talked to some CSM members afterwards, and there's also some comments on Reddit, and they showed that there was a feeling within the CSM and the last CSM that the old system of Skyhooks was bad, and that it needed to be adjusted to give the soft holder more of a stake within their own Skyhooks. And I think this also gave a wrong picture of the community back to the CCP. If you see the reactions all over the platforms, that there was a consensus that the subfolder should have more of a stake within the Skyhooks. I think there were a lot of communities that really benefited from having something that you can ad hoc create content out of.
But more to the point is during CSM19, there's going to be something that comes up, and Reddit is going to be mad. Your community is going to be mad. Other communities are going to come to you saying, "Why didn't you change this? Why did you let this go through?" What is your response going to be to them? How are you going to make them feel heard that you're trying your best, but CCP says no, you can't say anything to them?
Anybody that knows me on a private level knows that I don't shut about issues that I really do care about, and I simply do not shut up about them. So they can trust that I would not be silent about the issues that I do care about. And in the end, it's CCP's decision if they want to listen or not. And I think it's probably in the best interest of CCP if they realize that there's a large community within their game that is slowly getting disinfected with the game. The more it goes on, it's probably in their best interest to also listen then to the representative that might give them feedback on certain issues. And we can just hope that CCP likes money and likes having subscribers, and that way they probably will listen to what I have to say.
Okay. Now, there's a few questions from the community, and a very big one for us. And Eve Rookies is split almost right down the middle on multi-boxing. We use multi-boxing a lot to get fleets undocked, because PvP fleets, some of them you have to have roles and whatnot. We don't ever multi-box in PvP because there's no point. But then you have the home fronts that are being heavily multi-boxed, and once we get actual real people into a fleet, 5 people, there's no sites for anyone to do because all the multi-boxers. So what is your personal stance on multi-boxing?
I don't think multi-boxing is bad if the tools that exist within the game don't make it overpowered. I've, for the most part of my EVE career, I've played with a single account, I've seeded from a single account, and I made it work very, very effectively. Uh, I started my second account not because I started it, because somebody quit the game and he gifted me his account. And that's the account that I'm currently using as my secondary account. Um, you can be very effective with a single account. You can do most things in EVE with a single account, and I think multi-boxing is not the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue, and we have addressed this before, is gonna be drone assist, because this leads to a situation where one person basically copies work by clicking a button before, and then the aggression is automatically done by the drone buddy, and this leads to a very very toxic environment where one player that maybe we all know these EOS fleets or Ishtar fleets where one player with 25 accounts is having more of an impact than he probably should have. And if the same character would try to run these 25 Ishtars and accounts, all while not having the drone assist, he's going to be very, very ineffective doing so. And then he's putting more assets on the grid. And then you have, if he's putting so many assets on grid while being so ineffective with his ISK, um, this also gives us a target as smaller groups to kill them because we can just overload his input. For example, if somebody multi-boxes gunships and he has to refire his guns, if you just have one jamming ship that jams all the ships once, then he loses his cycle and he will be overloaded just trying to make these ships fire, and he's much more ineffective than 20 players piloting the ships themselves would be.
Okay. So, do you think that drone assist is the most pressing issue in Eve today, or is it ansiblex or something else?
It's projection. Like
Projection.
that's why it's my main point. Projection in general is the main issue because there's a reason why there are no mid-tier groups having Soft and Nullsec at the moment, even if there now is an incentive to take Soft and Nullsec. We have Metanoxes, we have Skyhooks, there's passive income, and we still don't see mid-scale groups like we had in the past taking Soft again. And it's just because they know if they ever go into any part of Nullsec, if they ever try to engage any pocket, they know that the ansiblex network, somebody is connecting to that fight. They will never be able to drop heavy assets, and they know that it doesn't even take a redeployment from a bigger entity. It just takes one FC from that bigger entity taking a fleet down, and you just cannot compete with that.
So, let me just ask you a quick question. This isn't like a platform question or anything like that, but since my audience is usually newer players, what is projection?
Projections are tools that give you the ability to get power into a part of space that is not necessarily your own part of space, or that is very, very far away from your staging. What I mean with Ansiplexes, we can see this if you take the Horde staging MJ5, and if you could do this right now, I don't know if you can. Can you open the soft.space map on the screen just to illustrate this?
Yeah, just a second. What site was it?
Soft.space. This is a site that shows you the different alliances who hold space within EVE, shown as a map, and there is a coalition influence map as well. And if we just open this, and the right top picture, if you
This one?
just click that, the right top, yeah, click that, the coalition influence map. So these are the different coalitions within EVE. We have the Imperium, we have Horde, we have the Phoenix coalition. On the left side of the screen, you see neutral stage. This is also Imperium because this is basically initiative. They share the Ansiplex network. So one person in either the yellow blob or in the purple blob can take Ansiplexes within that space, and Ansiplexes allow them to traverse that space very, very fast. So let's take an example. Let's take the purple blob Panda Farm and just go to any system within that purple blob. You have to not just consider the people close to that, the systems close to that system that you are currently invading. You also have to consider everybody who is part of that yellow blob could make it to you very, very fast within, let's say, 15 jumps at most, in the most cases.
And what are the different ways that people can project today?
It would be wormholes. In the past, it was utilized more was drifter holes. When rock walls were still out, people used to do Stuka fleets or Kikimora fleets out of drifter wormholes just to stack them up. Take ships out, but you have, in my opinion, something that is not as utilized at the moment is conduit drives, because the fuel costs of conduiting a fleet is that much lower than actually jumping a fleet. So you can do whole blobs fleets, 25 blobs, you bring them with a conduit, only one person actually has to pay the fuel for it. In the past, you used to open a sign and everybody jumped to that, so you can do a lot of consecutive jumps with a good, well-prepared blobsing fleet. So this is a projection tool that is currently not as prevalent because at the moment ansiblexes already take the task of fast responding. But this would be something that would pop up if ansiblexes actually got a little bit of a nerf. I think we would see obsing fleets for home defense.
Do you consider filaments projection tools?
It depends where. I would say in Pochman, yes, because you can target into the Pochman pocket. You can combine fleets from different avenues, and you can reliably get a 100-man fleet into Pochman and assemble them in a system and do a 100-man fleet in Pochman. I think it's a lot harder if you talk about random filament going into random parts of space, because if you have to split up your fleet into two fleets, you filament, it's very unlikely you can combine these two fleets again to take on a strategic objective. And this is also one of the reasons why I consider wormholes not as big of a problem here, or not a problem at all, because they're mass limited. And if you run a campaign, you do not only have one timer, you have tens, 20s, hundreds of timers, depending on the scale of the operation. Um, and if that is the case, you cannot really run a soft campaign out of just simply the wormhole alone. You need to have a whole staging somewhere from where you can actually pursue that campaign. It's the repeated, targeted projection from one point in space that, in my opinion, is the problem.
How do you feel about jump clones being used in projection?
There's one timer every 24 hours. I want to see a similar timer on ansiblexes, so I'm completely fine with them.
Okay.
Because you jump once a day, you can do one operation, that's done. And if a person is using the timer, like if somebody would attack the northwest of the purple blob that we just looked at, and somebody was attacking southeast, the same person cannot respond to both. He can only respond to one. So I think that's the important part. That resources have to be split, localized, and then local advantages should matter more.
Okay, very good. One other question that I have seen come up in various locations about something that they want CSM to do about, and nullsec kind of wants to get rid of, is needlejack filaments. What's your feelings on those?
Uh, in general, filaments, I don't. You cannot take a filament if you have an aggression if you have the log off timer of 50 minutes.
Yep.
It's the same as logging off. If I can just avoid somebody camping me in by logging off and just logging in my different account, why not give a new player with only one account the ability to escape being logged in as well with the same 15 minutes timer? Because if I'm stuck in a system, I cannot get out because I'm stuck in there because you kept me in. In the past, people did that for a longer period of time. I just logged off that account and just logged in the second character of the same account. And you can just play with that account, and basically the in-camping is not really doing anything at that point. So just give people that do not have the ability to switch to a different character or account to also continue playing the game. I don't think that's the worst part, because you have that 15-minute timer. Parchment filaments, I think, should just disappear in their current state. Or at least the extraction out of parchment filaments should definitely get looked at, because currently the combination of taking a filament anywhere in nullsec, I do that myself. I just cloak up a hauler, then I wait 15 minutes, then I just filament again, and I'm in highsec. And there's just no risk. I don't have to go through bottlenecks. Nobody can gank me in the regular systems that you used to. Just before the show, I had a small conversation with Drake, and you listened into it. Like most old players know these systems by heart: SV5, KB7, LXQ2, Torinos to EC in Pure Blind. Like there's so many systems that we know because they're border systems between nullsec and lowsec, and these used to be bottlenecks that were used a lot more than they are used now,
Yep.
because there's so many tools that you can do that go through these bottlenecks. And this is again to my first point in my campaign. I want geography to matter. This should bring some of the bottlenecks back on a broader level. And there are other mechanics that avoid bottlenecks as well that probably should be looked at.
Okay. And the very last question is going to be, what other candidates would you like to see elected?
I would like to see candidates. I don't particularly care where they're coming from, which part of space they're in, but that have an honest view of the problems with ansiplexes. And I wish there would be very, very strong voices within the nullsec community to get CCP to finally address these issues. I wonder what is going to change with the new updates coming in and how dense the network is going to be. But I fear it's not going to have the impact that many of us want to see. Because the problem is maybe some crabbing pockets are not as well connected anymore, but the main highways will stay intact and the main highways will still project. into further away regions, and you still have the problem of one system projecting 50 jumps across, and the accumulation of forces within one system and them being able to project so far. I think that's the main issue. And I don't think the current changes are going into the right direction addressing that issue.
Okay. So if anyone is in chat and wants to ask any questions, now's the time. And while they're writing in, is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Any other issues or things that you'd like people to know? So we do have a question real quick. What is your favorite ship and why is it the Panther?
I actually think I've never used a Panther with autocannons. I've only used a Panther with completely neutralizer fit to nuke out enemy capitals within a Blobs fleet. And that was like a amalgamation of different stats. That why I took the Panther and not the Redeemer. Now, the honest answer, what would be my favorite ships at the moment? It would be Retribution, Gnosis, and Executor Navy issue, depending on the task. Retribution is just, I think it's a 50 million ship. There are so many different fits you can use. I can link to a YouTube video I made about the Retribution, that how I use it in a very unusual way. Because I actually use a Retribution with an afterburner in Nullsec, and a lot of people would not assume an afterburner Retribution to be viable in Nullsec. It's just linked here. I actually explained the fit and how it works. And if you're a new player, that's a 50 million fit, and I've taken down Marauders and similar ships just with that one Retribution. So
I think my very first fleet where I actually encountered you out in Pravi I was in a Retro fleet, FC1, and I can't remember what you countered with because this is like 3.5 years ago now.
that's probably TSD times done, yeah.
Yeah, you split my fleet into 3, and Retro is one of my favorite as well. Enyo, though. Enyo is the best assault frig.
Nastani, in general, I want the pipeline to be gone just to use Podschwin as a logistics route that doesn't do anything for the content within Podschwin. I think the infilament is not the bad part, because you would have bottlenecks around the wormholes themselves, and people would have to scan down the wormholes. But right now, I don't even have a near scanner, right? I take my hauler, I filament into Podschwin, and I filament out again. And there's nothing else I have to prepare. There's no hole that I have to warp through. There is no bubbler that could catch me, or somebody that's camping the hole with a fleet trying to get me while I'm doing my logistics. So I think the extraction filaments would probably be better. Also, this would give a bottleneck to people within Podschwin. If somebody is farming stuff or is getting loot, you could try to catch him when he's on the way out, because you know where the wormholes are, or you have them pre-bookmarked. So there's again more strategic play if there's no extraction filament that just gets you out safely. There's a reason why filaments are not, even normal filaments are not being, you cannot actually really activate them in different parts of space. Like, I think you cannot use a wormhole, in a wormhole you cannot use a filament, right?
Nope, not anymore.
Yeah. And there's a reason why this was removed. And Podschwin still does this for Nullsec, and I think the logistics part should be cut off.
Okay, any other questions, or do you have any other thoughts? Going once, going twice. All right, well, thank you so much for coming and talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
It was pleasant. It's always nice knowing other candidates' thoughts. If you have any place that people can come and talk to you about your ideas or what you're planning on representing, or your ideas that you want to take to the CSM, where could they find you?
They could just go to the Spectre Fleet Discord, search my name among the FCs, and they should probably be able to get my Discord name that way. Just write me a PM and I will answer your questions. If that doesn't work, there's also the CSM campaign post. I will always answer people there, and I will try to answer them within a short time frame. And I think those are the easiest way to address me without any need of personal direct interaction.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much. And I will upload this to YouTube tomorrow, so everyone who misses it can hear your interview and contact you. So best of luck.
Yeah, thank you.